Hello, I'm Catherine Bruce, and thanks for joining us for today's topic on sustainability, part of our Bright Ideas series. Today, I'm joined by Kurt Vogel, Director of Relight at Acuity Brands. Kurt, there have been countless of articles written about the savings of LED, the long life, and the environmental impacts. Is that the whole story?
Well, it's certainly a big part of the story, especially as you look at new construction. I mean, if you're building a new building, you're certainly going to use LED specifically for those benefits of long life, great energy savings, great quality of light, etc. But the trick is when you're going into an existing building, which most of the work right now, frankly, is, where we're going into a working, occupied building, converting to LED. That's where there are a lot more concerns to take into account. And frankly, there are a lot more opportunities to have a greater positive impact depending upon the way you do that.
So can you clarify that a little bit? What's different when you're going into an existing building?
Well, if you think about it, there was a huge boom in construction back in the 80s and 90s. So the majority of commercial buildings right now that are out there ready to have some sort of a renovation are in that 25 to 30-year-old kind of timeline.
Which very old.
Coincidentally is about the same lifespan of a fluorescent light fixture. So you've got all these 25, 30-year-old fluorescent light fixtures out there that are very inefficient. They're old and tired looking. And despite renovation over the years where they may have gotten a lamp and ballast upgrade, or in some cases maybe got a reflector put in there, they're still pretty tired and ready for an upgrade. So these are occupied working buildings though, so the trick really is, okay, I need to convert these to LED. What's the best way to do it with the least impact to my employees, to the environment, and to just the general, how do I avoid disruption in the space?
So you mentioned the environment. I thought switching to LED always had a positive impact on the environment.
Well, once they're installed, they have a huge positive impact. It's getting them into place and getting them installed that can have a lot of variation in how much the environment is impacted. If we look at the overall carbon footprint of the project, if you will, there can be a big difference between fixture replacement versus retrofit versus all those different ways of converting that space. LEDs in general are going to reduce the electricity by typically about 70% versus the fluorescent equal that they're replacing. They're going into the space and reducing or eliminating the mercury in the space.
Always a good benefit.
Always a huge benefit. So there's lots and lots of benefits. It's finding the best way to get them into the space, to get those LEDs into place and installed with minimal impact to whether it's the employees in the space or the overall environmental impact.
Okay, let's examine that a little bit more, their overall impact and disruption. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. Well, picture of, a 30-year-old building, which is easy to do because we work in them. But those light fixtures in the space have 30 years of dust and dirt and accumulated crud on top of them. It's up in the plenum, it's on the ceiling tiles. So if you go into a space to completely replace the light fixture, the minute that fixture is taken out of the space, the minute you go up into that plenum, you're exposing the space to all that accumulated dust and dirt and all that. So remember, this is somewhere that an employee is working. So the amount of labor required, not just to do the installation, but to do the cleanup, to do the, the tinting off with plastic and all those things, can really raise the overall installation cost. It also has a huge impact on the amount of time and disruption that takes and its effects on the productivity of the people in that space. If you think about it, that fixture that you're pulling out of the ceiling is typically 10, 12, 14 pounds of steel and aluminum that has to go somewhere. So you're not just removing it and making a mess, you're also having to take that and dispose of it somehow. So typically, if you look at a project where the fixtures are being replaced, there are big hallway dumpsters outside that all these 14-pound light fixtures get chucked into and have to be hauled off to a scrapyard. So that's waste, that's fuel cost, that's human, human labor. So all kinds of waste associated with that. Now think about a new fixture being created from scratch. So more steel, more aluminum, more plastic gets put on a truck, trucked into the space. The carbon footprint gets bigger and bigger as you look at replacing fixtures in an existing building.
I think this is not only my nightmare, but every environmentalist's nightmare. Between the dust and all of the steel and material waste,
Right.
I wouldn't have looked at it that way. So is there a way to eliminate that fixture replacement, maybe just use LED tubes?
Well, that has become a common way to do this. People look at the expense associated with, well, I'd love to get a new light fixture, but I understand all the cost and disruption associated with it. I can't afford to move people out of there for that period of time. I'll just put tubes in. So that can be good from an energy saving standpoint, but there are some definite downsides to that, both economically and for the environment. The biggest thing is those tubes are typically plastic. They're all polymer material with electronics embedded inside. They're put together in a way that we don't know how those are going to get recycled or if they can be recycled. So if they hit end of life, we're going to have to deal with what do we do with those tubes? And there's definitely an end of life for LED tubes. As good as they are, we're finding that, number one, they lose light pretty rapidly. So typically an LED tube is going to lose at least 20% of the light output in the first couple of years of operation.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it is. And there's definitely an end of life associated with them. If you think about it, we're taking a lot of LEDs and putting them in a 1-inch diameter plastic tube. Not great for heat. LEDs don't like heat. And I think what a lot of customers are finding is that the LED tubes are really lasting much longer than the fluorescent tubes they replaced. So it brings into account that maintenance cost and that disposal cost that we may not have considered when originally looking at the payback numbers on replacing fluorescent products with tubes.
Right, that could really add up and then screw up your ROI analysis from the
Potentially,
beginning.
yes. Yes.
So where does that leave us? We would like to leave the fixture in place, but LED tubes aren't maybe the best idea. Is there some sort of solution out there where we can leave it in place and not have all that dust come down on our heads?
Actually, there is. Lithonia Lighting several years ago launched what we call the Relight products. And it's a highly proven solution. Actually, we've already worked with customers and we have over 1 billion square feet in the US being illuminated by Relight kits. And they're really the best of all possible worlds. Our philosophy on Relight is that we want to give customers the appearance, the performance, the aesthetics, the energy savings of a brand new fixture, but we do it by repurposing that old fluorescent housing in the ceiling. So again, we're doing it as a retrofit kit that installs completely from below. They never have to move a ceiling tile. They never have to expose that plenum. But when the project is complete, they have the look and the feel of a brand new light fixture. So it's dramatic in terms of the difference in the space. They are made in North America, so the supply chain is much shorter. We're focusing on that carbon footprint and reducing the overall amount of CO2 emissions in the process. They are packaged in a way that minimizes corrugated material. We get twice as many on a truck, so half as many trucks coming from the factory. So that story, you can see, becomes additive in reducing the environmental impact and making it a quick, easy way to retrofit and convert a building to LED sources.
So you mentioned 1 billion square feet of Relight kits out there already. Can you quantify that from a sustainability perspective?
Yeah, the impact has been enormous, and we've tried to put those numbers together. And to the best of our ability, and we're being very, very conservative. We're thinking that in looking at the numbers, we have eliminated the scrap of at least 55,000 tons of steel. So 55,000 tons of old fluorescent housings that would have gotten pulled out and sent to a scrapyard are still in place, but they've been repurposed with a Lithonia Relight kit and are now efficient LED solutions.
What about the energy savings there? You said efficiency.
Yeah, the energy savings have been enormous. You know, I mentioned that an LED fixture will typically save about 70%. Because the Relight kits use all of the same electronics as a brand new fixture, they're also saving that 70%. So we estimate that of the Relight kits already in place, we're saving over 4 billion kilowatt hours a year. And that number goes up every day. And just kind of fun facts, if you look at equivalencies, 4 billion kilowatt hours a year is like bringing 600 wind turbines online. It's about 1.5 million tons of coal that we've eliminated burning in power plants. And if you look at the Relight kits in place, they save enough electricity every year to light every home in the San Francisco area for a year.
That is an incredible sustainability
Cool.
story. Now, we talked a little bit about ROI a minute ago. What about the financial savings for the facility owner?
Well, I mean, that's the biggest part, right? Everybody wants to reduce their carbon footprint. We want to be more sustainable. We want to maximize our impact, our positive impact on the environment. But at the end of the day, the real green story is what's it doing for my bottom line. So that has been dramatic as well. So if you look at those customers we talked about, they're saving about $500 million, billion with a B, dollars a year on electricity costs by moving to the LED Relight kits. And that number, again, goes up every day. It's pretty dramatic. And that's not all the savings that they recognize.
So lighting controls is a big piece of lighting code across the country. Can you talk a little bit about what controls adds to the story?
Thanks for bringing controls into the discussion, because that's one thing that is an added benefit. I mentioned that the Relight kits use all the same electronics.
Right.
That means they can also implement all the same control strategies as a new fixture. So the Relight kits give incredible flexibility to do anything from a basic embedded occupancy sensor all the way up to a whole building HVAC integrated smart system that can then become a node for doing occupancy sensing, heat mapping of employee movements, conference room, you name it. It becomes a very versatile product.
And you've said energy savings, financial savings, a better carbon footprint. Are there any other types of benefits or savings you can see with a Relight to LED?
Yeah, and this is one that we often forget to think about. LEDs run much cooler than old fluorescent fixtures. Fluorescent fixtures are very effective space heaters. So converting to LED gives you an opportunity to take a lot of heat out of the space, which can really benefit HVAC systems. So unlike the tubes, which we already said run kind of hot, the integrated Relight kits, similar to a fixture, are using that old fluorescent steel housing as a very effective heat sink, so they run much, much cooler. That adds to the life of the fixture, but it also reduces the load on the HVAC system. So we're typically seeing big benefits economically from a reduced load on air conditioning during the summertime months, which it costs a lot more to cool a building than it does to heat it. So the overall net savings from the HVAC can in many times be almost as great as the energy savings on the lighting. And a lot of times that's not captured in ROI calculations.
Right. And I would love to find a building that is either not too hot or too cold when I'm at the office.
Right.
That would be wonderful. So speaking of that benefit, the people in the space, what is it like after they've had a Relight in their building?
That's, I think, the most dramatic difference, because as we talk about quality of light and we talk about heating and cooling and just general comfort, you know, building owners are very cognizant of the bottom line when it comes to things that they can measure, whether it's watts or dollars or things like that. But the most valuable asset they have are those people working in the space. So a Relight kit and the improved quality of light that a good Relight can enable just makes it a more comfortable space, a safer space, and I think a more productive space, rather than just changing the lamps in that old fluorescent fixture that they've been looking at for 30 years, to really take it as an opportunity to integrate controls, to take advantage of the improved lighting quality, and really make it a much better space for those employees.
Well, as one employee that has moved from an older space to a newer space in the last year, I greatly appreciate the transformation newer lighting can have in a building.
Absolutely.
So thanks for coming around, Kurt. Kurt is going to stick around for our next episode where we will look at a typical project and see how Relight can eliminate hidden costs.